Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Welcome to Tuesday's Deconverters Bible Study. Today I'm continuing the Bible study, one of the three I'm doing, called Tongues of Fire, where I'm looking at the book of Acts and analyzing, number one, the way I would have looked at it as a Pentecostal. What do I think of it now that I'm an atheist, and what are the implications of deconversion from this kind of attitude in Pentecostalism to atheism? Now, today we've arrived at Acts chapter 5, verse 12. This is what happens immediately after Ananias and Sapphira die. They're killed by God, and so immediately they have some sort of response to this, this event. And so what begins to happen is the apostles begin to do a lot of signs and wonders. Okay, in fact, this is the way it reads. The apostles performed many signs and wonders among the people, and all the believers used to meet together in Solomon's colonnade. No one else dared join them, even though they were highly regarded by the people. Nevertheless, more and more men and women believed in the Lord and were added to their number. As a result, people brought the sick into the streets and laid them in the beds and mats, so that at least Peter's shadow might fall on some of them as he passed by. Crowds gathered from all the towns around Jerusalem, bringing their sick and those tormented by impure spirits, and all of them were healed. Acts chapter 5, 12, verse through 16. How would I have looked at this passage as a former Pentecostal? Well, as an Assemblies of God, former Pentecostal, this was one of the big passages to support one of the fundamental truths of divine healing. I think it's the 12th or 13th fundamental truth. I think 12th probably. It's been so long, I don't remember the exact specifics. But this is one of them that, God acts and heals and does stuff. Okay, the biggest thing with Pentecostal theology, as you have to realize, is a lot of people get on here and they start dogging on the Pentecostals for being, heresy or whatever else. As a Pentecostal back in the day, I would have argued, no, we're not heretical. We still believe all the stuff that other churches believe. The thing is with Pentecostals is we would argue back at those people, no, your problem is you don't have all the gospel. What you have is salvation. You might have, if you're a holiness denomination, you might have sanctification. But we would argue you don't have the baptism in the Holy Spirit, which is an event that they believe is past, the normal work of grace of salvation. That at some point you have to tarry in the city of Jerusalem, so to speak, until you're endued with power. And this power to witness and do things is demonstrated in acts of God. And that we would look at churches and basically say, sorry, you don't have the whole gospel because you're dead. Okay, you may have people that are saved, you may have people that are active in ministry and doing stuff, but they're not empowered by God. Okay, and it's because you haven't had the faith to believe that. Okay, that's how a Pentecostal tends to look at criticism of them. They're saying, no, we're more complete. You guys have only part of the message of Jesus, and we have all of it. In fact, the Assemblies of God has a logo where it says all the gospel on it, and that's the whole idea behind it. And part of that whole gospel is the idea of divine healing. But we need to remember what happened here. Okay, these events that are happening in Acts 5, 12 through 16 are immediately following Ananias and Sapphira. And it's interesting that Peter is the one that mentioned in this passage, his shadow falls on some people that pass by, they get healed. Okay, a very interesting statement. Okay, but here we have this notion of Peter, who was the guy that basically told Ananias and Sapphira, hey, you're dead people, is now the guy out there walking around and his shadow is healing people. Okay, this is definitely pushing the apostolic authority angle of making sure these men who are the leaders of the church get more and more clout so that anything that they say is given more authority and power. And this is something that would have come out of this, Now God is demonstrating Peter's authority and power as an apostle by giving him the ability to basically heal with shadows. Like he's proving it over and over. But the atmosphere is one of fear. Okay? The the atmosphere has been created by the death of Ananias and Sapphira. The whole fear fell upon people. And a lot of Pentecostals say, well, yeah, they sort of have this. No, this is terror, okay? They're afraid of God, okay, in that sense. And it's one of the real great contradictions in the New Testament of how in the book of Acts, great fear comes on the people, and then all of a sudden God does all these miracles. But then later on, writers will say God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind, for instance. And so when you have this contradiction, the Pentecostal is going to side with the book of Acts and saying that this reverential fear is necessary. Now, all these signs and wonders are being done by the apostles, but the note is no one else dared join them, even though they were hardly regarded. Nevertheless, more and more women believed in the Lord and were added to their number. This almost seems, it's a very contradictory statement. No one else was daring to join them. They were highly regarded, but nevertheless, more and more people believed in the Lord and were added to their numbers. So people were still coming and still joining the church, but there was a great fear about joining the church, okay, because of probably what happened to Ananias and Sapphira and all that. And as a Pentecostal, I would say, yeah, there needs to be a reverential, terror of God in order for miracles and stuff to take place. And this has a very interesting effect. And as I switch here from my gears of how I looked at this as a Pentecostal and looking back at it, one of the things I can note is that a lot of times when we had healing services or there was a regular part of a lot of my Pentecostal churches where people would come up after the service to get prayed for or whatever. And that allowed people to, that need to go, but then we would have a healing element to the service at the end of the service. People would stay and pray and things like that. There's always this attitude of, boy, I hope this works because otherwise I'm going to make God look bad or my faith, more likely my faith look bad. There's always this, well, you got to have enough faith. You got to have enough faith. You got to have enough faith. And so if you're not healed, the fear is, somebody's going to come up to me and tell me I need to have greater faith. I had a friend when I was in seminary who was also a Pentecostal believer, and he suffered from what's called post-polio syndrome or something to that effect. What happened is he got polio as a child. They gave him the vaccine, and it saved his life, but he still wasn't completely good. And then later on in life, some of those polio-like symptoms began to return, including pain, muscles not being able to work. I mean, he had a military career, but then somewhere on the line, these symptoms began to return. And so one of the things that happened to him a lot was he would show up in his wheelchair and people would pray for him. And, he had to develop this whole mindset because it never happened that he got healed. He never got healed. He died still with this condition. And one of the things I began to note in him was this, what if God doesn't come through, okay, attitude. Now, he gave me a book, I think it was called Till Healing Comes, written by some local author, and the idea of, waiting in faith and tarrying in faith and all this stuff that came, the justification of why people don't get healed from like real things that you could see is amazing. You'd have blind people, deaf people, legit, stuff like that, but also physical ailments, like they're missing a hand or they can't walk, legit can't walk. And you would think, Pentecostals, this is a great opportunity to demonstrate the power of God, but those are the people I never saw get healed. It was always the people that could talk and make up a story. And as a skeptic now, I realize there's so much fear about not getting healed and then somebody coming up to you and saying, well, you need more faith, because then there's this whole confrontation that happens about faith. And it begins to just kind of erode your belief system. Okay. And my friend kept the faith right up to the end, but never got healed of his condition, as far as I know. And I have to ask the question, did he have enough faith? Was he really, because at that point now the person's dead. Well, did they really believe because they never got healed? Okay. Divine healing, which is supposed to be this wonderful thing of the doctrine, is often used as kind of a cudgel, about people's faith, whether they have faith or not. I had several other people in my church that were elderly, had major conditions, died with those conditions, and a lot of people say, well, they weren't really, And I finally looked at one person, I remember when I was still in ministry, and I said, hey, if what you're saying is true, then you shouldn't die. Okay, there should be no reason for you to die. And if you die, then you didn't have enough faith. And it was at that point, I think, a lot of them backed off. And the whole issue of divine healing and faith and the faith preachers is always there. And as somebody who's now a skeptic at it, it's like it's a social conditioning where people expect to be healed so much as they will concoct any story that makes it look like they got healed, just so they don't have to deal with the fear factor of, oh, somebody's going to come up to me and tell me I need more faith. And I don't, and if I don't get healed, I don't have enough faith. I'm not a good enough Christian. And so there's this judgmental attitude that comes out of divine healing. And when you look at this passage again, you have these fantastic claims of healing. Okay, like Peter's shadow just touches people and they get healed. They're crowds and crowds of people. It's like Jesus didn't heal everybody. Okay, despite all his work and despite all the things that they said about Jesus, we needed Peter and the apostles to do more. And I guess it, fine, whatever. But the point is this. This is spectacular stuff that's very visible and would be very visible if the story's true. The problem is I don't think it's true. I think it's, whoever wrote Luke Acts is just putting together the stories. And I remind everybody that Acts is literally for the Bible tells you so. There's no historical collaboration from the book of Acts at all. And it's one of the most damning things. It's worse than the Gospels, okay? So, and that's saying something. What you have then is this fear that comes about because we should be seeing spectacular things. It dominated church leadership in the Assemblies of God. I would hear it all the time. We just don't see the things like we saw before. And I have a sinking feeling that they were saying that right from the moment Pentecost started. We just don't see the things we saw before because we have in the book of Acts a lot of these spectacular, very visible claims. And in Pentecost, I never really see spectacular, visible things happen. I see a lot of social manipulation. I see a lot of societal manipulation. I see a lot of, faith-based people hallucinating stuff. You can trick the mind into believing stuff. And now the skepticism just comes out all the time whenever I see this kind of stuff because it's always an alternative explanation. Preachers who know anything about mentalism can usually do pretty well as a Pentecostal faith preacher because they can convince people that something is true when it's not. And so you have that element in there. Now, at some point, somebody's going to talk to me about their divine healing stories, and I'm going to ask for documentation. Okay? I'm going to ask for your doctor's documentation. Otherwise, it's just a story. Okay? And if you went to the doctor, I'd have to conclude maybe the medicine is what healed you, not God. So that's kind of puts you in a kibosh situation. You have to have a healing example for me that you didn't go to the doctor and there's no other explanation, and you have good witnesses that document with photos and stuff and show your medical conditions. You're kind of in a situation where you need the doctor to analyze the condition, but you receive no treatment and then get prayed for and get healed. And in which case I could also say, well, maybe the doctor was wrong. So you have to have it doubled up. There's a whole criteria now that I have for divine healing that's rather lengthy to prove it because there's so many things I saw that were just not right, manipulation, whatever. And I have a lot of alternative explanations for healing now as an atheist. And this, of course, leads into deconversion. Those of us coming out of a Pentecostal charismatic tradition, there's a lot of mind effery, to put it bluntly, about healing and about miracles and stuff. And what you have to get over is that's not real. As much as you thought it could be real, it's not real. And putting your trust in somebody that actually knows something about the human body, I have my own issues with the medical profession too, but it's more of a philosophy problem that I have with them, not whether or not they learn stuff that's actually helpful. And yeah, human medicine has its flaws, okay? But at the same time, if you're just running to somebody to get prayed for, you're just going to get a placebo effect maybe at best. And at worst, you're going to be putting off necessary treatment that could save your life. And so it's something that you have to really think about these days when you're deconverted is, I can't just keep running. You've been conditioned and trained to run to prayer to solve your health problems. And that's just not the good way to go. You have to get over that and kind of embrace, something that actually works. And that's a hard transition for some people who've been in the Pentecostal church for a long time. Divine healing was a big thing for them. And so, it's a struggle, okay, because especially this whole notion, well, you don't have enough faith, or you're not good enough, because I'm going to tell you right now, I still get that today. Well, you just didn't have the right faith, or you didn't have, and so even the people in the church now that I'm deconverted will come at me on this channel talking to me about how I didn't really have enough faith to be a believer, let alone get divine healing. And I have to tell them, yeah, you're right, because faith is not a virtue, it's a vice, okay? It's something that we do when we don't want to really struggle with real answers. We default, we punt, and we take the cowardly way out of faith. And you dive into something that isn't real, okay, in order to, answer your problem. So you're right, I didn't have enough faith to be a believer because faith, I still think that faith is a vice and not a virtue. It doesn't have all the qualities that a virtue should have, and it believes in stuff that can't be proven. And if God was real and healing was real, it could be proven, but nope, not this time. So, well, that's kind of my thoughts on the Pentecostal sphere and divine healing. I'd be interested in if you're a Pentecostal out there, former Pentecostal out there, I'd be interested in some of your stories of some of the things that you've come to terms with that may help out somebody else. I'm certainly not giving a complete thing. This is a Bible study, so it's just a discussion starter. So after that, just comment away in the comments. This is your part of the Bible study where you take the comments and use them to help engage in better understanding and maybe ease your transition as far as deconversion. So that's it for that. Thanks for every like, share, and subscribe. I always appreciate it. If you want to support the channel in more tangible ways, I have a PayPal linked in the description. You can, of course, do super thanks, super chat when there's a live premiere. There's also the very simple but very profound way of helping any channel, any content creator that you support, which is becoming a member of their channel. For just $2, you can become a citizen of the Rabyd Nation with all the rights thereof, and you have to buy your citizenship here. I'm just being honest about it. Most nations lie to you and say you're just part of it, but no, you really have to buy it. And so there's other levels that you can have with more perks and benefits. So take a look at that, hit that join button, and you'll really help the channel out. That's one of the best ways. Other than that, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe, make sure you do all the things that get a channel noticed. Those are the free things you can do to help me out, and I appreciate every single one of them. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So you don't want to waste your time on faith, religion, Pentecostal, divine healing. What you rather should do is take all those things and give them to yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.